Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Macro Pro and Friends. Today, I'm joined by Leslie Dilbeck from iRatings. Leslie is an expert all things AMA guides. In fact, Leslie had a hand in with some input into the 6th edition and has written many supplemental articles. Hello, Leslie. How are you today?
I am doing good. Thank you, Macro Pro and Diane, so much for having us provide this training today. We're really looking forward to it.
Well, we have a huge audience today. I think it's a testament to the topic and also to you, because you are an excellent speaker and you really know your stuff. But let's do a little bit of personal business. Now, your son was in college and he's in Chicago. He just finished his first year. Tell me a little bit about your daughter.
Oh, yes, my daughter. So my daughter is 24 and we live here in San Diego. She's starting college again, which is totally great and awesome, and works with special ed kids in the high school system here. But I want to hear the exciting news about your son.
Well, my son is 30 and he's graduating college this year. And he just purchased his first house, which is really fantastic. Got the keys yesterday. So this is really exciting news for me and my family. And the reason why Leslie and I are sharing this information with you is because we've had our share of challenges with our children, right, Leslie?
Oh, amen, sister.
So Leslie and I are going to do either a webinar on Zoom or an online chat. We're going to post something where we can talk to you about our experiences. Our goal is that we want to help other parents in our situations. Leslie, do you want to share just a little bit about what you went through?
Sure. Ours really revolves around mental illness and the challenges with that, and how to love your kid well, and how to survive as the parent going through some of the challenges that brings and the heartache. And I'm so thankful that you and I somehow happened to be chatting one day and we both started sharing our hearts about it. And it was like, oh my God, another parent that gets my struggle. And since that time, we've really been able to, just like your son's current news, like I know what a big deal that is, just, and how happy that makes me, but even how much more your mama's heart is full because of that, journey that you both have been on, and your husband as well.
And in my case, my son had addiction issues. So Leslie and I are going to cover those things, kind of how to deal with them, how to cope with them, finding ways that you can reach out to other people, because not programs aren't for everybody necessarily, but maybe you can link up with somebody like Leslie and I have been able to do with one another. So we're excited to bring this program. If you think it should be a Zoom program, so you could talk to us, would you just put that into the chat box? We're just going to see what people would like, and we will respond accordingly. All right, so Leslie, before we get started with today's program, I have a little bit of housekeeping. So the first thing is today's webinar is worth 1 California CEU credit. You'll receive your certificate within 1 hour of this program, so you should get it quickly. If you have a problem downloading that, it's probably because you're using Explorer as your browser, so please switch your browser, and that should fix this situation. Secondly, Leslie has handouts, as do I, and they are attached to this webinar. So please make sure that you have them so that you can refer to them. Leslie's is on today's program. Mine is on our nurses and how they can help you. And since we're talking about AMA guides, you would probably really like to have somebody to help you go through those medical records, and our team can do that for you. And then lastly, there'll be an encore performance of this on the Macro Pro YouTube page. So with no further ado, Leslie, take it away.
Thank you so much. Today, we're going to be talking about common impairment rating errors. And first of all, hello, everyone. I'm so excited when I get to see the attendee list, because I see a lot of my existing clients on here, some people I haven't seen face-to-face in a while. So thank you so much for joining us. And some of you may have already been and may have already seen me do this presentation, but the good news is I do try and keep it up to date and try and make it a little bit different each time. But also what I know about learners is that you tend to, maybe take, like, some people take 50% of what I've trained you on, and then the next time they add to it and it's another, 70, they get 75% up to, then the third time they see my training, maybe they're like all like everything's gelled and crystallized in their mind. So if you've already seen this, just take the things that you remembered and validate yourself with that, saying, yes, I knew that. And if it's something new, write it down, jot it down, do something so that it will help make your job easier. So my whole goal in my training is to help you work smarter, not harder. I love that, right? So it's all about balance. So Leslie Dilbeck, right here training you, VP of Client Relations, but I do have a team of people that really pour their minds and their abilities and expertise into the reviews we do for our clients. Just a little bit about us. We are experts on all editions of the AMA guides that are currently in use, so 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th edition. They're used in multiple jurisdictions. We've literally reviewed thousands of medical reports. I've been doing this little niche of workers' comp for 17 years now. This is iRating's 10-year anniversary, believe it or not, and it's been a great ride, and we're certainly thankful for our clients that have helped us get to this point. What we do is we look at the doctor's reports and we look at the information and provide rating reviews, correspondence, and follow-up services like deposition preparation or trial testimony, really looking to see if the evidence supports what the doctor has opined with respect to the impairment assigned. So our review is really in depth. Yes, we can provide the strand ratings, and we do that every single day very quickly and very economically for you. And if that's what you need, please feel free to hit us up. But really, where you're getting the biggest bang for your buck and getting a greater level of resource for your file is in our area of expertise in reviewing that doctor's report. So our reviews really go into first what the whole person impairment is as assigned by the doctor, and then what it is based on the evidence, the corrected rating. So we're providing you that variance so you can kind of decide what you need to do next on your file, what action is next required. So one of the things that we have in our reviews is this detailed analysis where we go through and we provide you what the doctor did correctly, what they did incorrectly, and why, and what reference we're making to the AMA guides, or perhaps it's Alvarez-Guzman case law, or some other notable thing within our area of expertise that says, no, doctor, that is not correct, and here's why. And maybe the doctor needs to clarify, or maybe the doctor, intentionally did it incorrect to try and make both parties happy. I'm going to go into some very specific errors and common errors we see and that we've seen after reviewing thousands of medical reports over the years that you can kind of red flag on your files. And so as we go into our review, we see this whole person impairment uncorrected or as assigned by the doctor. We strand it out for age and occupation for you, as we have to do in California with our schedule. And that top rating, that top schedule rating, that as assigned rating is really what you're going to be getting from the disability evaluation unit. They're rating that doctor's report as is. Our rating, we then provide you that strand rating as well, our corrected rating. So you have some insight of, do I need to schedule a deposition? Do I need to write the doctor a letter? Or should I just settle it? It's not that big of a variance. Trying to help you make decisions that are cost effective on your files and will help you move them to closure. So that is really the core of what we do in our core area of expertise. But I think it's important to highlight the error rate. I did this training last week for a client and they were shocked by this. If you've already seen this training, you already know the answer as to where and what I'm going to take you to as far as the error rate in California is concerned. But in March, April of 2010, so yes, that was 12 years ago, but I have some updated info for you. So just keep that in mind. Don't just push the study aside just because it was 12 years ago. The AMA felt it was important to look at over 6,000 cases to determine physician accuracy in assignment of impairment. And I was pleased and appreciated the involvement I had with this study as I was working with 2 esteemed physicians and an esteemed defense attorney from the state of Massachusetts, of all places. And what we determined in that study is that 81% of the cases were rated too high or incorrect. So wow, right? So my client last week hadn't been through this training before, and she was shocked when I said 81%. Now, I being involved in this study and coming from a claims background, just so you know, I didn't go through my whole bio, but yes, I started out as a claims examiner trainee many, many years ago, let's just go with more than 25 years ago. Okay, that gives you a little insight of how old I am. I am not afraid to share that I will be turning 50 this year. So I did start out in claims, and so my first thought when I saw that 81% error rate, I was like, big whoop-de-doo. What's the variance? Tell me, how much is this problem costing the system? Is it a $200 problem, $2,000 problem, $12,000 problem? What are we looking at? So we had to look at what the average as assigned rating was versus what the corrected rating was. And on average, the variance was about 11%. So conservatively, that is about let's just go conservatively, $15,000 error. Okay, so let's go with that, and we'll work from that point and talk about some other problematic issues that are even more costly than that. So that study looked at the fact that there are AMEs involved in the system, QMEs, and treating physicians, and they found, of course, that the AMEs had the highest error rate. So yes, that's problematic. And the QMEs had an 83% error rate, which was fairly consistent with the study, and the variance was about 11%, which is what the study showed. The treating physicians had a decent track record with a low variance of almost 7% between as assigned versus corrected. And that's something you can work with. So I highly recommend, even if you are thinking this might go to a QME, have that treating physician's report validated and reviewed so that you know, like, hey, this is what the actual rating is on the case. So when it does go to an AME or a QME, at least that's on the record, and that is supportive of the evidence in the file up to the date of that treating physician's final report, so that the AME or QME has to really do a lot of explaining if they're going to deviate from that rating. And it gives you a good insight and sets the tone also for the claimant's expectations of what their case is worth. So I'll be talking about that kind of towards the end when I talk about strategies. That expectation piece is super important. So let's go into common errors. So as we look at our common errors, we know that complex rating systems have the highest likelihood of error. It's simply a basic law of science, I guess you could say. Any process that has multiple steps involved, there's a greater likelihood for there to be a mistake. So let's talk about this for a minute. I don't know if any of you, my son is 19 now, but we did Legos for years, Legos upon Legos upon Legos. And if you've ever stepped on a Lego barefoot, you know what pain that is. But I remember him getting the real huge, like the $75 sets. He'd save all his birthday money and get the hugest set. Now they're probably like $100 with inflation. And those had multiple pieces and a book to show instructions. So multiple steps involved in that. There were a lot of mistakes made on the way of building that set. The same holds true for a mathematical problem or a recipe that you want to make a certain dish. If there's a lot of steps, you're going to make mistakes. So I'm going to set that foundation for you, food for thought. So when you're looking at cases where there's multiple steps to determining the rating, there's probably going to be a mistake that you need to look out for. Now, hand injuries, complex hand injuries, oh my goodness, these ones are difficult. Okay, so let's take a scenario, assembly line worker or maybe a machine operator, okay, gets their hand caught in the machinery. Let's say they have a couple digits amputated, a couple fractures, they have some skin loss, perhaps they've also broken their wrist, and there may be some median nerve damage. Okay, think about all the possible rating scenarios for that. Okay, obviously amputation, yes, loss of motion of the digits, perhaps digital nerve loss in the digits that were injured. We've got potential skin rating. We also have the wrist, probably range of motion loss. And if there's peripheral nerve damage, we're gonna have to figure out if there's sensory or motor deficit related to, let's say, the median nerve. That's a lot. That's a lot to consider. And I will tell you, a case like that can take me a few hours to look at as far as validating the doctor's rating. I can also tell you that even some of the best rating physicians out there that have to do those types of cases, I've found mistakes in the report. And I'm not like shocked, because I know kind of what the standard would be with a case like that, one would expect there to be a mistake. So a second set of eyes is super helpful on those types of cases. But I have a little tool for you that I hope you'll jot it down on your notes. This is extremely helpful for me when I'm looking at one of these kinds of cases. It's figure 16-1A and B, and it's found on pages 436 and 437 of the AMA guides. This is a recording form for the physician, and it breaks it down, all the things the doctor needs to think about for assignment of impairment, when to add, when to combine, when to convert. There's a lot going on there. So I highly recommend, if you have a QME, or if the applicant attorney will let you on an AME, send a copy of this form with your cover letter and ask the doctor so nicely and graciously to fill out that form to corroborate their assigned rating. I think that you will find that that helps at least direct the doctor down the correct path. Now, this image is not super great, but I point it out to you because there was a significant error here made, and it's found where we look in that first column at the very bottom where it says combine the digit impairment. What the doctor did incorrectly in this was they added. So a little hint to you, look at those directions very closely. Even if you need to take a little highlighter and highlight combine for that doctor. And then even where it tells you to convert in that last column, bottom row. That will help you, and it will help the evaluator to get to hopefully a correct rating without making some of the common mistakes that come up with these kinds of injuries. So I hope like that one little tool right there was like a nice little helper for you, that you take that and think about it the next time you have a complex hand or upper extremity case. Now, peripheral nerve injuries are also one of those common ones that we see difficult. We have to think about the process. I'm gonna just in brief, this is in no way meant to make you an expert or make you feel like you want to like give you the result out. Okay, peripheral nerve, we have the median nerve and we have the ulnar nerve. So the median nerve, sorry, my earring just fell out and I don't even know if you can see that on camera, but I don't have those little stopper things. So got it back in. Okay, so the median nerve innervates the thumb, index finger, the middle finger, and a portion of the ring finger. Okay, so it innervates it. So it means that it controls sensation and motor function of those digits. So the way that this is rated out, first of all, you determine the nerve, you find out the maximum value for total sensory loss, maximum value for total motor loss, and then based on the findings, sensory testing and motor testing, you take those maximum values and you multiply them towards the sensory and motor deficit. You add those values, that's at the upper extremity, then you convert to whole person. Multiple steps, again, supporting that scientific law that we discussed earlier. Now, when we look at the sensory testing, there's also some added things that add even more so to the potential for error, not just on the complexity component and the multiple steps being involved, but it's even interpretation of the findings. So sensory testing, as required by the AMA guides for this type of condition, is 2-point discrimination and Sims-Weinstein monofilament testing. These tests determine the degree to which the person has lost sensation in their hand or in their digits from this median nerve injury. Depending on the findings from these two tests, that's where you're going to place the person within the sensory deficit category. So you can see sometimes the doctors may just take the fact that the patient says that they have decreased sensation, but not even do this testing. Well, that's not validating the finding. That's not giving us all the information we need to apply a certain degree of sensory deficit. We can also see that sometimes the doctor will use the incorrect test. Maybe they'll use like a safety pin, or maybe they'll use a little brush or something like that. Well, that's not what's given to the evaluator to make this determination within the AMA guides. Is very specific, because the table for determining sensory deficit is based on the assumption the doctors use these two tests to make that determination. Now, motor testing, also we run into some difficulties and some problems. First of all, we recognize that it is a test of effort. It's a test based on patient effort. So they can fake it. They certainly can. They can maybe not try their best. Let's go with that. But you have some things in place that'll help you to validate the person's effort. And that would be, first of all, prior records. If there's normal motor testing documented, and then all of a sudden they get to the AME and they're not able to function 100% with motor testing for that median nerve, that's a red flag for you. That's a question that should be asked in deposition as to why did the test results show lesser ability than they were able to do 3 months ago. Did the patient get full effort? Did you note atrophy in the thenar eminence? Those types of things and questions can be asked and raise an eyebrow as to the validity of the assignment of motor deficit. It's also important to recognize if you see an evaluator going down the path of assigning motor deficit based on grip loss, that's an absolute no-no. Page 494 of the guides tells us that that this is not allowed for cases involving the peripheral nerve system. So be aware of that. Now let's talk about complex regional pain syndrome. And I do want to mention that if you have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the questions. We'll get to them at the end. Diane, I thought that I was going to see you on camera, but while I'm going through my slides, the camera part goes away, so I don't see you popping on, just an FYI in case you were popping on trying to ask me a question, or you can interrupt by just simply saying ahem, and I will stop what I'm doing and answer the question. Okay, so
Leslie, just so you know, we have no questions, but as a reminder to everybody, you can ask questions in the question box here at the control panel, and I will read those questions to Leslie. So the show's yours, Leslie.
Thank you. All right, so complex regional pain syndrome. This is one of those, like, yikes. If you have one of these cases, God bless you, because I want to say, let me rephrase that. If you have one of these valid complex regional pain syndrome cases, we see some evaluators assign this term to people they don't know what else to give them as far as a diagnosis, because there's nothing objectively else that they can point to give some other diagnosis. So we do see that, but we do know complex regional pain syndrome, CRIPS, is also what it's known as, or RSD or causalgia. There are some objective diagnostic criteria for making this determination. So in order to first being able to go down the path of assigning impairment for this condition, you have to go to table 16-16 on page 496 of your big fat green book and look and see what types of findings are pertinent and specific to your case. And it can be myriad of issues, but the guides tell us that if there's not 8 or more of these certain clinical signs, you cannot assign impairment for complex regional pain syndrome. Now, there may be something else you can, like decreased motion. It's not a diagnostic criteria for making the diagnosis. It's simply a table that we use to make a determination of if we're even going to go down the road of rating for impairment for this, because the impairment values are quite high. It's almost to the level of the extremity being completely amputated. So the signs and symptoms are these vasomotor changes, like a purpling of the skin or mottled or cyanotic skin. The skin will be cool to touch. There may be swelling. The skin may be overly dry or overly moist. There will be trophic changes. The skin will be either really smooth, non-elastic, no pull to it. Soft tissue atrophy, especially in the fingertips. Of course, joint stiffness and decreased passive motion. Passive motion, just as a reminder, is, let's talk about this for a minute. Active motions, when the doctor says, move your wrist, flex and extend your wrist, ulnar and radial deviate your wrist, right? And if you go to the doctor and you're like, I can't move my wrist, they're going to passively see how much movement they can get to kind of make a determination of like what's going on. Do you actually have complete frozen motion in your wrist, or is there inhibition for pain? So we're looking for that joint stiffness, but also decreased passive motion, the one in which the doctor, the evaluator, helps the patient through the ranges of motion. Nail changes, where they'll be blemished or curved or talon-like, and hair growth or hair loss will be noted. There's also radiographic findings that can help make a determination. And in those radiographic findings, there may be some findings of osteoporosis or some other finding that's consistent with Cripps. It's basically like the limb is dying. So you can see, and I want you to think about this, if you have one of these cases, kind of go through this laundry list in your head to say, does it have this, this, or this? We're really super awesome. I don't like to be super braggadocious, but we're really good at these types of cases because we really can just go through those medical reports, look at those findings, and say, yeah, it seems reasonable. I'm going to give you a little confession. We are of no benefit to you if we are just completely conservative on every rating and say every rating 0 or 5% when the doctor's saying 30%. We try to give benefit of the doubt to the findings and the evaluator if appropriate. So what I'm trying to say with this is that if you have a complex regional pain syndrome case and we find 7 of the diagnostic criteria, we probably are going to say, you know what, that's pretty awesome, because typically what we see is they might have one thing or quite a few of them. So what we want to be able to help you do is move your case forward, not to have it stuck, not to have it set for adequacy, not for you to lose a trial. We want to give you an opinion that's going to be appropriate based on the facts in the case. So that's what I have to say about complex regional pain syndrome. Now let's talk about some of the subjective factors that crop up on our cases. Now, some of these should have gone away with SB 863, Senate Bill 863, where you'd only have to pay for treatment for certain things, but not the permanent disability. However, we see certain ways that the opposing side is able to finagle these diagnoses or conditions in. We have to recognize, first of all, that psych is a completely different rating methodology. It's using the Global Assessment of Functioning scoring system. And that is not our area of expertise. We certainly will include it in a case where there's multiple physical injuries or physical injury in addition to the psych, stranded out for age and occupation for you. But we're not able to go in and say, no, that GAF score is not supported, or yes, it is. I can do what you can do, which is look at your schedule. Within the schedule itself, there's ranges of GAF scores with a description of what that claimant should look like and the signs, symptoms, behaviors, those types of things. And look at that and kind of weigh it out and compare it to the facts of your case and say, does this seem like it's consistent with my case? And if it's not, then that's when you need to start asking more questions, getting clarification, do all the things you do on your file normally to validate a certain claim. Now, sleep and sexual dysfunction, I want to highlight for you. I want to show you this, that these are actually first and foremost, activities of daily living. If you see impairment assigned for either one of these, the first question you should ask yourself, is there injury to the brain? Or has the person gained excessive weight because of their, let's say, ankle fracture, and now they have sleep apnea? And is there injury to the reproductive system? And if you answer no, then it's more probable that this person's complaints and any assigned impairment separately from impact on ADL is not to be rated under that chapter. Chapter 13 for the sleep arousal disorder, and then we have the reproductive system chapter for sexual dysfunction. So looking at ADLs, you'll see that both of these things are indicated in that scale and provide us some insight to that. So just, be aware of it. Typically, we're able to give you some pretty decent arguments. We see those usually used as a way to inflate the value of the case. Gastroesophageal reflux disease, interesting. Okay, so you have a claimant that because of their medications, now they have GERD or reflux. There's some basic things that need to be looked at in order to assign impairment for that. You have to, first of all, determine if there's been weight loss, if there's been significant weight loss, if there's any objective testing to prove or disprove the claim. Remember, the AMA guides were implemented to get rid of most of that subjectively assigned permanent disability that we had with our old system ages ago, right? We used to assign impairment based on subjective factors of disability and work restrictions, and sometimes on objective factors of disability. But the whole thought is the patient shouldn't be able to go into a doctor's office and say, hey, I'm having this complaint, and then the doctor would say, okay, that's 10% whole person. No, there needs to be something to objectively support it. I'm not going to say that it's always or never. I never like using those terms, but I will say, like, really look at the evidence, see if it's supported or not. Then the other question is there remission with medication? If there is remission with medication, meaning it goes away if they take their meds, then maybe it's only a 2% whole person impairment for effects of treatment. And that's found in chapter 2 of the AMA guides. Just an FYI on that. Rare conditions, this corticospinal process. So let's take the corticospinal injuries that are non-presumptive. So the kinds in which the person has injury to their spine and their spinal cord, but they're not paralyzed or paraparalyzed, right? So they're not a quadriplegic or a paraplegic, but maybe they have something like now bladder incontinence because of their surgery. And as a result, that's going to be long-term because that part of their spinal cord was injured, or maybe they have a foot drag or a foot drop. So those are non-presumptive corticospinal injuries. So this is, again, a multi-step process. And as we know, multiple steps have a higher frequency of error. The way that these are rated, first you have to determine which DRE category the individual falls within. And then you put that aside for a minute, and then you look at the spinal cord neurological deficits. So let's say they have bladder incontinence and they also have, foot drops. So you would rate for station and gait. In chapter 15, there's a table for that. And then you would also rate for the bladder issue, and there's a table category assignment for that. Assign the impairments, combine them, and then combine them with the DRE method, and that's how you get your overall corticospinal injury rating. Now, traumatic brain injury is another multi-step process. Let's just give you this little note, a little cheat on this. Like if you are assigning impairment in chapter 13, central and peripheral nervous system chapter, and this impairment is validated and good to go, but you also get a psych report giving you a GAF with a whole person impairment, you can't have both, either or. The reason why is inclusive of assignment in chapter 13, the central and peripheral nervous system chapter, for the chapter we go to for brain injuries, there is already some value given for mental and behavioral issues, and that is assigned impairment. So it would be a double dip if you also gave the impairment associated with a GAF score under a psych rating. So remember, this is more of a physical injury. Obviously, this is an injury in which you've probably had a nurse assigned to it. There's been CT scans. You've got full evidence there that this individual has a brain injury. Now, I'm not talking about the person that gets bonked on the head and has post-traumatic headaches for 2 years after they got bonked on the head. I'm talking about ones that there is absolute evidence, whether it's some kind of change on CT scan, or maybe there's some brainwave changes noted, those types of things, MRI findings that definitely show injury to the brain. The way that this is rated, and we see the mistake come up in this, you look at all these factors to determine if they exist and if there's a sign impairment. So consciousness and awareness. So somebody has a brain injury, and as a result, now they have seizures on a frequent basis. Episodic loss of consciousness and awareness also can coincide with that. Sleep and arousal disorder, maybe they have difficulty sleeping as a result, and there's a formal sleep study that proves that up. Mental status, as I just mentioned a little bit earlier, that gives you that clinical dementia rating, where you take things into consideration that are a nod to the person's psychiatric wellness, right? And then aphasia and dysphagia, so speech intake, taking it in, understanding the words make sense or don't make sense, and output, being able to speak in a normal fashion. So what we see doctors do is they'll rate all of these and then combine them, but that's not what the directions are provided on page 308. The actual specific instructions are to go ahead and rate each out, but determine the most severe. So they have to pick the most severe. They don't get all of them. They pick the most severe. They put that aside, and then we go forward and we rate for distinct neurological impairments. And so that can range from cranial nerve assignment of impairment, and the cranial nerves are all broken down into each cranial nerve. There's a table for those functions of the cranial nerves for each one. So sometimes you might see somebody has some vision issues as a result of their brain injury, or maybe tinnitus or something like that, or maybe a facial droop. That is under the cranial nerve tables. So you rate those out. If the person has station and gait issues, some kind of extremity issues, those kinds of things, you rate for all of those. You go ahead and combine those. You can combine those, and then you combine them with the most severe cerebral impairment. So that, as you can see, is multi-layered, multifaceted, and lends itself to error, quite honestly. Now, the next one is Alvarez-Guzman. I have a whole training on this one, but I think it's important to consider some of the absolutes that we do know about Alvarez-Guzman. As we know, this has been codified with SB 863. We know that it's the law of the land. We're not going to get away from it. We do know that there's, case law that always crops up around this topic. So you should be aware that we stay up to date on that stuff, so we can help you when we're reviewing a doctor's report to say whether or not the doctor's report is meeting the criteria. But let's think about what this decision tells us, because it's codified with SB 863, but it really just points us back to the actual case law. It doesn't lay it out very sufficiently within our regulations and our law, our statute. So look, when you go back to the actual decision itself, the burden rests with the party disputing the rating. It doesn't allow for a rating based directly or indirectly on the old schedule, the schedule in effect prior to 2005. The doctor has to include the strict rating first. So if they're not providing that and they're just going right to Alvarez-Guzman, there's a problem with that doctor's report, and there's different strategies you can employ with that. You can stay silent on it and then bring it up at the best and most opportune moment, or you can provide that doctor what the strict rating would be based on your independent review of the rating of the comprehensive physical exam and history and findings, and ask the doctor why they disagree with that strict rating, why they didn't go there first. The doctor's report must constitute substantial medical evidence, and the doctor cannot use obviously inapplicable sections of the guides. Just a real quick note on that. When we look at substantial medical evidence, it can't be based on conjecture, speculation, or guess. Well, it can't be the doctor saying because I said so, or it seems reasonable, or it's fair. Those are all very subjectively determined. What I think is fair and what my kids think is fair, well, they're getting more in line with what I think is fair as they become adults, but maybe when they were teenagers, are two different things, right? There's no way to test fairness. So it really has to point the doctor into providing some meat to their rationale as to why they went in the direction that they went in. It can't just be throw it out in the universe and see if it sticks. If it does, that smells like a case or a report where the doctor's report is not meeting the criteria for substantial medical evidence, and you can certainly litigate that issue, but count the costs that'll be involved with that versus the variance, and if you just settled it out, obviously. And then, as I mentioned, no obviously inapplicable sections of the guides just to get a desired result. So basically, I'm saying you shouldn't be able to go to the hernia chapter for a back injury. So be aware of those cases. If it just doesn't seem like it is a nice fit, if it's a nice match, then it probably is refutable and it should be looked at more closely. So as we look at the litigation strategies and just even non-litigation strategies to correct these errors, the first step is you're already here. You're in training, which is awesome. You're helping yourself learn some things about identifying errors, identifying those problems that may not support the rating. And once you've identified that, then you need to decide, do I need to send it out for an independent rating? Do I need to, write the doctor a letter? What do I need to do next? One thing I do want to give you just some professional advice on, don't send the independent rating report to the physician. If you get an iRatings review or some other independent rating, take the content from that report and put it in a letter, send it to the doctor in correspondence. We even actually can help you write that letter. That's a service we provide, and it is one of my favorite products because we write these letters in such a way that it really holds the doctor to a higher level of just a yes or no answer. It really requires the doctor to contemplate what they've put in the universe with their words and that documentation that is a piece of evidence for the case. So that letter writing process is extremely crucial, and it's actually very affordable when you look at the outcomes that you can get from just doing simple correspondence to the evaluator. Now, you might have a case where that's not an option. You have to depose the doctor, and that certainly happens very frequently in our work comp world here in California. But one of the things I'd like to really direct you to is your team, right? We have a team. We've got the NBA finals right now. I like the finals. I don't watch the whole season. I like football. I watch a lot of football. And all the other sports, I'm kind of loosely, like I can have a good time with them. But what I want to talk about with team aspect is, okay, so you've got your rating expert, maybe we've helped you on the case, you've got yourself, okay, so I kind of say you're the team captain, and then you get to start picking your team. You're going to have your nurses, your defense attorney, let's go with that one, right? So your team, they're part of your team, and you're drafting this person for your team. You want to make sure your defense attorney has the same philosophy and goal and idea as you do about what an independent rating does for you on your file. Now, we want to be on the same page as you and your defense attorney. I want to be able to tell your defense attorney, I'm not telling the claims adjuster that they're going to get the rating all the way down to what I've opined in my review, but I'm here to provide you some resources, tools, and strategies to be potent at that cross X. I want you to be awesome. Defense attorney, I want to make sure you have a full arsenal. My thought on this is you never fail unless you try. And that's huge, because I've seen plenty of cases where the defense attorney might say, oh, well, you're not going to win. You're not going to win on that rating. Well, did you even try? Like, it's worth at least a try. Like, I'm not talking about the most costly expense or endeavor in mitigating your issue, but let's even just try with a letter, some interrogatory, maybe even just negotiating with the applicant attorney using the points that have been listed in the iRatings review. So if you know, you have people on a team, a sports team, that say, no, you should throw it to this person, no, you throw it to that person, oh, I'm not even going to try and throw it at all. There you go. That's a good analogy, and I hope it paints a very strong image in your mind. Now, let's talk about some of the things we do in CrossX. I appreciate this process too. We do not charge for this, by the way. If we do an independent review, we will talk to your defense attorney before CrossX. I see one of our awesome clients on here, Shirag Desai. He's a defense attorney. He has seen the value of this. We see the process being that, you know, we talk to your defense attorney, we go through the questions that could be asked relevant to the AMA guides. There's probably going to be quite a few other questions that are non-related to permanent disability, but we want to be able to say, okay, defense attorney, ask this question, look at this table, look at this page number. Do you understand why you're asking that question? Are you understanding the physiology, the way the body works in this regard? I want to paint an image and a picture in that defense attorney's mind of what would be supported for such an impairment rating and why the doctor's report is flawed, and giving them that information. I love the follow-up phone calls I get from a defense attorneys where they even sometimes will tell me like, oh, well, the doctor didn't totally change his mind, but they came down, they took away X rating, and so it brought it down lower, or well, the doctor didn't change his mind, but this depo further supported the lack of substantiality of the opinion. So that's a win right there that maybe not necessarily can be quantified immediately, but can have some impact over time. And I'll show you at the very end a case study we have on an ongoing basis with an insurance client of ours that shows some pretty excellent outcomes. Now, you know, you have cases in which the claimant's pro per. There's no defense attorney, no applicant attorney. And I talked about this early on about setting the claimant's expectations. Remember when I talked about, hopefully you were paying attention, but you might have been getting your coffee. The error rate in that AMA study for the treating physician was 70% error rate with about a 6% variance, right? So it's helpful if when you've put a number out into the universe to the injured party, that number is something that is not going to be overly stated to set that claimant's expectations really high. What am I talking about? Let's say you get a treating physician's report that says the claimant has, you know, 28% whole person, rated out for age and occupation, it's 34% PD. But in your gut, you know something's wrong with that doctor's report. You don't know all the ins and outs of why it's wrong, but you know it certainly is not 34% because you were not anticipating that on your file. You didn't reserve for that based on the evidence in your file. So that's your red flag right there, right? So if you tell that claimant 34% and then you get an independent review and it comes back at 12% PD, what do you think that injured worker thinks they're entitled to? At 34%, right? That's what you said. You said it, right? You put it in a benefit notice. So we have some clients that'll put it on delay. They will tell the claimant, hey, it's coming to this, but we're disputing it. We do not agree with it. And it's helpful because those overstated values can sometimes put the claimant into a place of distrust with you when you come back with a lower value. And they're already a lot of claimants are already in a place of distrust with their insurance company or their claims adjuster. So adding to that may push them into litigation. Now you just, you know, expanded the cost on your case. So just be careful of that. But if you have that independent rating and it's supporting the doctor's, you know, findings, use that as your supplemental material for a walkthrough, get it done, get it over with, close your file. Now, if it's a litigated case only on the applicant side, you don't have a defense attorney yet, use an independent rating as a basis for your settlement. You can use the problems that are listed within the independent rating as to what the doctor did incorrectly. Don't disclose your review, use the arguments as your own. Hey, here's why I'm making the offer I'm making. These are the problems with the doctor's report. If you don't agree, we can certainly go and set a depo, but we know this doctor's not, you know, scheduling until 4 months out. And we have to remember what motivates these applicant attorneys. They're doing work up until this point for pretty much free on a case until they get that case settled. So they need to play out in their mind, am I willing to wait 4 more months to get paid for the work I'm doing on this file? So it may be a motivator to get them to at least start negotiating. And negotiating, to me, if you can get it less than the worst case scenario, that is a win in my book. Now, trial. That is one of the situations that we think might be the most sexiest part of workers' comp. That and Subrosa. I tell you, when I first got into claims, I thought, oh, this is exciting. And then I realized it wasn't as exciting as I thought it would be. But it just kind of has like some kind of sexiness to it, right? Going to trial on a case. But it's also very expensive. So clients pick and choose their cases very carefully to go to trial, and then the judges pick and choose the cases very carefully that they'll actually move forward and onward to trial. We have certainly been called to testify in many cases that have been settled. I would say more cases that have been settled at the trial day versus cases in which we've testified. But the good news is that when your case is being set for trial, your defense attorney can use the independent rating or review to develop their trial brief. That's excellent, because then it's like, ooh, applicant attorney is going to really see it in writing. Maybe they're those learners that just have to see it written down. You said it, but now it's in writing. Like, oh my God, like, ooh, I don't know if I'm going to win at this. But also, it gives the judge some food for thought, because they are going to be giving rating instructions to the DU rater. They're also going to be making a consideration of whether or not the reporting is supportive, if it's substantial medical evidence by which an award can be determined. You will have your defense attorney list the person, the expert rater, to testify. The case in chief is tried, and then the rating portion of the trial occurs. The DU rater is cross-examined. Then we come in, we testify using, basically the facts from our independent review. That's, again, more food for thought for that judge when they go through and give their findings and award. These are the least often situations that we run into. It's more of the others, like letter writing, deposition, negotiation, that we see most often. But what we do know, and I'm getting ready to summarize here, and we're going to wrap it up, we'll have some time for questions, is that the guides tell us a very specific process that needs to be followed to determine impairment. Now, there's a little wiggle room in some areas. I'm not going to be like, oh, it's absolute, right? As I mentioned earlier, want to look at things from a very practical approach, see what's reasonable, see what the evidence does point to, what's fair. When I handled claims, I was a lover, not a fighter. I even got thank you notes from my claimants, and it was certainly because I think, like, if you take an approach that, what seems to be reasonable, I have, seen both sides. I've seen the adjusters that are like, no, I'm not going to give, that guy was a jerk on the phone to me or whatever, and being assertive on their files, which I think a certain amount of assertiveness is obviously important, but it probably creates more friction and more cost to the file versus those individuals that kind of look at things piece by piece, and that's kind of how I do it. Pay what you owe. Pay what the evidence supports, right? Pay what you owe, nothing more, nothing less. That's the right thing to do by your client, but it's also a good thing for the injured worker. I think it's tragic when an injured person walks around thinking they are more disabled than they are. They are more percentage-wise disabled than they are, because then it already sets a tone for what they can achieve as a human. So I don't know, that might be too hippy-dippy for you, but that's the way I look at it. I think that you can overcome a lot of these errors, but you need to have the right people on your team. You need to make sure that this expert writer can testify for you, can back up what they're saying in their review. You want to make sure that they're readily available for you. You want to make sure that you, as the captain, if you're the claims adjuster, picking the right person. Like, I would say maybe like whoever the one that has to move things forward, like a quarterback or somebody, that you have that person throwing the ball in the right direction and they're on the same page as you. So please be aware of that, and partner with those people that are on the same page with you as far as philosophy for you as a specific adjuster, or as your program dictates, or as your client dictates. You want to really all be on the same page. Otherwise, it just doesn't go well. I've seen it. It just goes in all sorts of directions, and then it starts to become more about ego you know, having the final say and power struggle. So I like things to be copacetic between all parties. Okay, so I talked about an outcome study for you, and I did fail to mention one thing at the earlier onset. I meant to add this slide and I forgot. When I talked about that study, in 2010, you know, I talked about the error rates among AMEs, QMEs, and treating physicians. We run our data regularly. We have thousands and thousands of cases we've reviewed over the years. And what we know running the data as most recently as the beginning of this year, for the last 10 years, that error rate has not changed much. We are a little bit more we tend to be a little more liberal in our approach than the two doctors and the defense attorney I did the study with. But that's because we're looking at what's reasonable and not just being absolute in our determinations always. I mean, there are some cases that we can certainly have that position. But also, if you're on this webinar, I think that you might want to hear something really important, that because we have all that data, right now, we don't charge for it. We might be soon. But for now, if you ever get a panel, QME, or a list of doctors to try and use for med legal, we can tell you what we have in our database on that evaluator. We'll tell you how many times we've reviewed that doctor, what percentage of error rate they have, and what the average incorrect rating is versus the average corrected rating. And that's a lot more than you just going, well, I guess that last name sounds awesome, let me choose that doctor, or going all, you know, across your list and going, this guy, I don't know, he used to be good, last case I got was bad. We'll give you some hard data that might be helpful. If you love that, comment, tell us in the comments that you're going to use it. You want to probably know how to get that information. Download my presentation. It'll be my third slide, has my email address, and I will go through and run that data. I might redirect you eventually to our info@iratings.us. That's info@iratings.us for some more immediate attention if I'm traveling. So that's something that's important. So we are getting ready to wrap up. Oh, I am so proud of myself. It's 10:58 and we're here for an hour. How awesome am I? Yay.
You are on time, girlfriend. You are totally
You're muted, so you need to pop.
No, I'm off. But I do want to say Laura says she's definitely going to get service.
Okay, good.
So Laura, good job. Other than that, we have no questions. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. And Leslie, want to thank you for your great information. We're having some technical difficulties with your camera and your volume. But I'm certain if everybody would like to see this on the MacroPro YouTube page, we will have it up on there for everyone. And just as a reminder, MacroPro is a document retrieval company. We can get all the records you need for your claims and litigated files. In addition to that, we do have nurses on staff that can do medical summaries for you. So if you got some big dog files and you need somebody to go through them so that you can understand everything and send your reports and stuff to Leslie, after it's done, then you'll have this great breadth and understanding of what's going on in that file. We face it, we're very smart about a lot of things, but we're not all nurses, right? And in order to have the great information at our fingertips, we need somebody sometimes to help us out. Leslie, would you like to say anything as we close?
I always do the same thing in all my webinars and trainings, same closing. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, awesome. One thing that I see here is a bunch of names, 170, almost like 180 people on here, which is awesome. But I do recognize there's actual human beings behind the names that I'm seeing on here. And I recognize our humanity. And through that, I recognize we need to be gentle with ourselves, where a lot of us are still working from home, doing things a little bit differently than we were doing 2 years ago, whether it be parenting or helping our parents or whatever it might be. So be gentle with yourself, be gracious with yourself, be kind to yourself. That way you can go out there into your community, into your world, and be kind to other people. So be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and sprinkle everywhere like glitter. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I hope to see you guys face to face soon.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you later. Check us out on the MacroPro YouTube channel. Bye-bye now.